So it's December 9th and it's beautiful. Sunny, calm, just absolutely perfect. It's like a day at the beginning of September almost. Well, maybe day at the beginning of September in Grand Prairie. But we're getting it in December, so yay! And I made a simple dinner, just some organic zucchini, yellow and green, and some asparagus and some bell pepper, onion, garlic, and I'm going to be putting this on it. It was given to us and I want to try it out. James is going to eat the salad roll on the side, and it looks beautiful. I didn't make it, somebody else made it for us, but I noticed that they slice the shrimp in half, which is really smart. Then it looks, you get double the appearance out of the roll, which is part of the pleasure of it, right? And without having to spend so much on shrimp. So, I have a lovely display here of the gourds. They're still keeping pretty well, and so we're gonna eat that. Now, I'm going to talk about a few books while I'm waiting for James to show up for dinner. Get me in the picture, okay? Well, anyway, it doesn't really matter that much. So, I read through these books this week, and oh, Elvis, did you do something? Come on. He shouldn't be out here. James, let him out. Come on, mister. You can sit with me. And James will be all confused and frantic when he comes out, because he'll be looking for you. Anyway, calm down, honey. I'm going to talk about the Wheat Belly books first, because I think they were published first. I can't remember. I read the first Wheat Belly book a long time ago. Go lay down, darling. I know it's very exciting, isn't it? So I read this one, and I do enjoy reading these things. I'm not complaining about them or anything. They're not totally the diet I follow, but I try to eat clean, and for the most part I think these paleo kind of people are too. So there's a lot of overlap. Like a lot of what I eat, most of it would probably be considered paleo, but anyway, but I don't like that term. I don't like the whole idea of, like, nobody knows what people were eating in prehistoric time. That's the whole point. It's prehistoric, right? So it's laughable that anybody is referring to something as the paleo diet, the original diet that people should be following. It's absurd. So anyway, I have Elvis here. So anyway, Wheat Belly, total health. Now, I did have there were a few parts that I thought were kind of funny. He mentions avoiding whey completely. So he doesn't want you to include whey in your diet. Yet, in the cookbook, there is a recipe for chocolate bars which includes whey. So obviously, he changed his mind, or maybe it's sometimes he likes it, sometimes he doesn't. You can come and sit down and eat. And now this one, gosh, I can't remember. I like this one actually. This one is written by a journalist, and I find that books written by journalists are really well written and really well researched. So I enjoy reading them. And out of these books, I enjoyed this one the most. So now I did have some problems with this book, like, well, not really problems, but he shows a lot of graphs talking about how there were less incidents of heart disease or heart attacks or whatever in war eras when there were food rationing. And he's attributing this to low carbohydrate intake, if I remember correctly. This was the first book I read in the bunch, and I'd have to look through my notes to say for sure. But, or go back into the book. But anyway, I mean, food rationing. They're rationing everything. So, can you really attribute that to rationing carbohydrates? Or is it more just not? I mean, they're certainly not, in war times when they're doing food rationing, they're not giving people all the grass-fed beef and elk and whatever to eat that they want to eat. No, it's food rationing for everything. So you'd have to eat less of everything. So that's my main problem with this, but I really enjoyed this book. I'm not saying that I didn't. I think everyone should read it. Oh, another problem with the Wheat Belly Total Health. Okay, when he keeps mentioning people eating grains out of desperation. You know, they were starving, they couldn't find anything, so somehow they decided to go to the work of eating some grains. Well, if you think about it, they've went to an awful lot of work to eat the grains, because the grains that we eat today are nothing like the grains that we once ate. And so that's why a lot of people who eat grains are trying to eat more of the ancient grains, because they're nothing like the ones that people have went, scientists and horticulturists have went to great lengths to come up with grain varieties that we eat today. It's taken a long time. If you look into what the original corn used to look like, nothing like what the corn looks like today. They've went to a lot of work to grow corn, and it's a lot of work anyway to grow a field of whatever grain. You know, it's now modern technology has made it less work for the farmer per unit area, but anyway, it's ridiculous. Out of desperation? No, that's absurd. Now this one, Fat for Fuel. I enjoyed this quite a lot also, and I did take a lot of notes on these. So I'm learning from these books as I try to learn from everything that I read. I don't read very much for the fun of it. You know, it's mostly work. I go through one of these every morning. So, Elvis, don't do it. So, with it, you need to know. Elvis, so with this one, now I did find one part really funny when he was talking about how he thinks that, like, he doesn't believe that you should be using cast iron pans for frying your food, which I did use cast iron to saute this, and very nice, thank you. And I did use a little bit of coconut oil, which you don't necessarily have to do that with cast iron, but I thought, what the hey, so I did. Anyway, the reason he doesn't want you to use cast iron is because he doesn't think that you should have very much iron in your diet at all, if any, possibly. He's very against iron because he'd rather you have things like zinc and whatever, and these things counteract each other when you eat them together. And if you're trying to do maintain a healthy diet when you're not eating very often, like he believes in fasting, which that seems to be very common lately, the intermittent fasting, and if you try it, you're trying to pack in a whole lot of nutrients, which I believe in nutrient-dense diet. You're trying to pack a whole lot into a very short period of time, because you're only allowing yourself to eat for little windows, right? So the rest of the time you're fasting. So if you're doing that, you have to make sure which you don't want to be eating things that are counteracting other things, or what's the point, right? So he doesn't think you should be eating iron. Anyway, or at least that's my take on it. And the one thing that I found funny about it is when he talks about how, or writes about how women he thinks that women live longer because they menstruate, because they have a way to get rid of their iron every month, their excess iron. So and he did go right out and suggest that men should put some leeches on their skin, or practice bloodletting in any way, but I don't know.
They do that playing hockey.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. Okay, so another comment. Like right now, I'm reading mushroom books. I've put a whole bunch of mushroom books on hold because I did learn how to grow mushrooms years ago when I was studying at Olds College, and I just want to refresh, right? So that I continue to have this knowledge, and I desperately want to use it actually soon, but we'll see if we can get out to a farm and get some things done. But anyway, so back to this book. This is called Modern Mushroom Cultivation, and they sent it all the way from the University of Alberta for me, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you. I love the towel system. And I read another one this morning too, because these really aren't very thick. And I took a lot of notes, but they're small. So this one, he talks about using DDT to control your mushroom pests, and a lot. And then what else does he talk about? Oh, using creosote as mushroom trays. So you build your, like in this book and the other one I read this morning, they're just talking about basically like button mushroom cultivation. So anyway, so when I was at school at Olds, I went for a tour of Money's Mushroom, which is a great facility, and their whole composting site and stuff. It was lovely. And well, the composting site was smelly, but as to be expected, right? The mushroom facility was not. Again, as to be expected. They have these, it's basically like drawers, but you don't pull them out or anything. It's like big drawers that are filled with compost, and then you have, and then they grow mushrooms in the drawers. They're stacked up right on a shelf. So they're not like in a dresser or anything. They're stacked up on shelves, but you have to have like sides on them so that the compost holds in, basically, right? So they were, in this book, he talks about making them out of creosote because that doesn't affect the mushrooms growth. But that makes me think, well, there was probably a lot of chemicals in mushrooms back in 1950, whatever, when they wrote this book. Because I can't imagine it would be very safe to eat mushrooms grown in creosote. But they were doing it. And probably for a long time. So that gets me thinking about obesity code, which is another one of these very popular modern diet books. And he in obesity code, he talks about, or writes about, how eat like his grandma would tell him to eat, like don't eat before meals or you'll get fat, or this or that. And my grandma was feeding me sugar cookies, which I really loved, and I love my grandma, and I am a lot older than him, than the author of Obesity Code. So I don't know what his grandma was telling him to do or why. I can't say. But in his grandmother's time, she was eating creosote mushrooms. And you know what? You might be too. Because I might be. I have no idea. Because you don't know about the standards of different countries. You try to look for more traceability in the products that you buy, so you can figure out how they were grown or how they were produced. But you don't know. So you just hope you're buying from a country which has some good standards and go with that. So that's about it. We're gonna eat.